Hello, and welcome to another episode of Bebop Cowboy.
Well, you've really changed this every time.
I'm purposely doing it for this one. Bebop Cowboy on Power podcast. There's reasons, but yeah, I am one of your hosts, Taylor, and with me is the mechanical, going right to it, shooting straight. Mr. Sushi B, how you doing?
I am doing okay. This should be an interesting episode just because it's kind of a non-episode.
Yeah, well, that, and it's also one that I think has slowly been uncovered a lot more since.
Mm-hmm.
But it's one of those that I remember when I first found it. It was probably about a decade ago or so.
Okay.
And I was kind of like, what? What is this? I've never heard of this thing.
You didn't think it was a student project or something?
But it just, I think how I found it was that there was a website that had some like essays or something, and I was like, oh, whatever, just it's some bebop stuff.
Mm-hmm.
So I was reading through them, and they had some interesting things to say. And then one of the links on that site had a mentioning of the episode, the special that we're going to talk about, the Mish-Mash Blues.
Yep.
And yeah, it is something very different. It kind of reminds me of, I don't remember what the show was, but there was like that one anime way back when that it got canceled or it finished up, and so the last episode was a complete, like, just, oh, okay, we're done, whatever, and then just, I wish I could remember what it was called. For whatever reason, the School Days comes up, and I don't know if that's quite it, but, because I don't even know what that is, but I just remember they just sort of ended it, and it was just like, what? The reason why there's this, it was, the original airing of Cowboy Bebop was a bit disjointed.
Mm-hmm.
So there were episodes that were skipped along the way. So, like, for example, the very first episode was Stray Dog Strut.
Mm-hmm.
So, episode 1, episode 4, 5, 6, 16,
Mm-hmm.
and 17 were skipped. And so they got all these other episodes, and then they had episode 18. And then after episode 18, this came out because they canceled Cowboy Bebop.
Mm.
They're like, this is nonsense. Wait, what is this? Get this out of here. This is too violent. This isn't, where's our spaceships? Where's our spaceships so we can have these model toys so we can start selling stuff? This is ridiculous.
Mm-hmm.
So, Watanabe and Co., they made this thing, which is an amalgamation of different scenes throughout the show, but also with their own, like, unique dialogues for just, like, voiceovers for character philosophies,
mm-hmm.
as well as music that is not in anything else in the series.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
So it is a beast unto itself, and I'll throw this out. The ending song, that's not real folk blues, but the one that takes up like a third of the episode is Shaka Zombie.
Okay.
Recover the Sky of Day is the translation of the song. So if anybody wants to hear it, I enjoy it. I like Shaka Zombie a lot, actually. And some of it's a bit is a bit kind of, for lack of a way to put it, stereotypical in hip hop stuff, but I don't know, a lot of their stuff's also really enjoyable. That, and also the music for this episode is from an album by Tsuchie. It's called Get a Point. Came out in 1996.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, you might be able to find the album floating about online. My favorite song is the piano one. that plays there. It's like doom 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 kind of thing. It's called Fake. Good song. But
okay.
So just want to throw those out there.
Yeah, sure. Yeah, since it's certainly not a well-known sort of lost episode, if you will. So.
Right, because this only aired out in Japan, and I think it only aired out that one time. I don't think there were multiple airings of it. I could be wrong, but as far as I'm aware, the Nothing has this episode. I could be wrong, but I'm not aware of anything that it's like, oh, hey, you can buy the episode here. Or this, which is kind of weird. You would think at some point they would throw that on there. Knowing our luck, it is probably going to be on some sort of special Cowboy Bebop edition that'll have the awful live action with it.
Never know.
Oh, yeah. I don't know what I would do if that's the case.
Yeah, I don't know. Somebody would obviously buy it so it could be preserved to some degree.
Right.
Somebody's going to bite the bullet.
So, but yeah, this is your first time seeing this. What did you get out of this? Were you like, what the heck is going on? Like,
not necessarily. I'm kind of, I'll put it out right at the start here, kind of indifferent.
Okay.
I don't mind it, but I also don't really see the need for it. Like, it's not, it doesn't really provide any necessarily deeper insight into the characters or anything, but it's just kind of a fun philosophical episode to just kind of throw on. But if you miss it, you're obviously not missing anything from the grand scheme of the story or the other episodes.
Yeah, it just helps solidify certain quirks about the characters, right? Like Jet's penchant for wanting to do the unexpected of what's expected of him and stuff. And, a lot of Faye's sort of attitudes and how she goes about things are like, oh yeah, this like it still stays in line with him, but it doesn't, like you said, you don't really, you may get I think a bit more out of Spike for once. So, until kind you get like, true. But I mean,
he seems still the least sort of fleshed out character still within this, even I found. And I found Faye's commentary. Now I know this was translated to English, with subtitles, so I don't know if it's super clear, but it just seemed as if there was conflicting messages about her. Like she was talking about, like one thing was like her skin, right? Remember in the other episode, she's like, oh, you got to protect your skin and all this stuff.
Right.
And then in this, she was just like, what's wrong? What's the matter with getting some freckles and so forth? Like, oh, that's kind of not what she was saying previously.
Well, yeah, I mean,
her even like her thing about the men, I was kind of like, huh?
One
way she's talking one way and then she's talking the other, and she's talking like it was kind of a constant back and forth.
Kind of her character though is that she's torn going one way and then torn going another, and this is somebody who, because they've been ripped from their life to some degree. I mean, you see a lot out of people nowadays is that ask them a question on Monday and then ask them that same question on Thursday. They might have two entirely different answers for it.
And it might not even be that long. Asking something Monday, and by Monday afternoon, you get a different answer.
Well, I mean, yeah, but I guess that's, for me, it makes a bit of sense, is that this is that waywardness. She just doesn't really, like, she has an idea, but she doesn't really. And so that's why she floats. And the only thing that's really driving her is debt and also just running from her past.
Right. While also trying to find out her past.
Well, yeah, I mean, and in the sense of the debt.
Yeah, well, that part, yes.
Yeah.
Which we'll get to.
So, but, yeah, so indifferent. I mean, I guess it's because it had been so long for me. There was this kind of almost like weird unearthing,
Mm-hmm.
especially with having all of this different music. Like, what did you think of the music and stuff? Did you feel like it was sort of out of place because it's so different
No,
from?
not really. I found it worked well for this episode, and it still
Mhm.
felt within the universe. It's a little more of a kind of that, um, like that technological ambiance, kind of,
Mhm.
is the only way I can describe it. There's some performing artists that their background music is kind of a little bit like that. I can't think of like a particular one off the top of my head, but that's kind of the vibe I got as it's going through. It's music, but there's a little bit of like a technological spin on that music, and then it's got a lot of like that ambient, not sounds per se, but more like that ambient music that's just kind of low key
Mhm.
and kind of flows until the very end with once the
Yeah.
credits kick in.
Gotcha. Gotcha. So it's gonna be maybe a little tough, I guess. I don't know if I want to say like what did you like on the episode or like what of the because it goes through what 24 I think different little lessons or topics
Mm-hmm.
anything. Probably go maybe that through that route. What are some of the ones that you really enjoyed or like, oh, that's kind of a little interesting.
Like from the specific sections.
Is maybe that or just I guess yeah. What did you like of the episode or like
Yeah,
because this is such a
it is. It's very hard, and like because the the parts are so quick. Like they're
Mhm.
usually like a minute to maybe two at max.
And then some of them are like 5 seconds.
Right, they're a lot shorter. Like a lot of the Ed ones I found were pretty short for the
Hmm.
mostly.
Right.
Even Spike's are pretty short, except for the one where he's talking about
With
flowing
Sitting
like
Bull.
water. Well, that one
Oh,
too, but
okay.
I found the flowing
Yeah.
with water one I found was probably the longest section for him.
Hmm.
But wasn't really introducing anything new necessarily. Those were all basically lines he had shared in what was that episode now? 9?
Oh, Wealth for Venus. That's 7
7? Okay.
or
Yeah.
8. I'm sorry.
The
It's 8. Heavyweight Metal Queen is 7.
the lines were very similar to that episode, so it wasn't really unearthing anything new there necessarily. But I think it was a little bit deeper, like the way he was referencing Bruce Lee. Did he say
Hmm.
Bruce Lee in that original episode? I can't recall.
No, I don't think you did.
Okay, so this was the first time he was actually, because everything he was saying was obviously like attributed to Bruce Lee, but here he
Right.
actually kind of cites him, I think twice within that section.
Hmm.
Um, like I like the Faye stuff, but as I said, it's just kind of that constant like playing tennis. She's saying one thing and then hitting the ball over the net to say something else on the other side, and then hitting it back. So it's just kind of like juggling that back and forth.
Hmm.
And for Jet, aside from like the idea of him saying, what did he say? Something about meeting old friends who, I forget the exact phrasing, but something like are disappointed in your change in career or life or whatever he said.
Oh, with Jet. Oh, because they were just surprised that he he did that.
Mm-hmm. That he
He
went from
made this
such
choice.
a, one end of the spectrum to the
Well,
other,
but
from duty
it's
to like,
prefaced with the quote about writing about how yeah it's his way of trying to romanticize how bad his life has gone.
mm-hmm.
That's how I saw that. I
Well,
was
now
like, oh,
he says something about the idea of freedom though too, right? Like
mm,
breaking free from that duty.
mm,
So, and it's like, I guess, kind of liberating for him to go from such an extreme of by the book, when he's talking about earlier, like being the black dog and never letting go and things like that. And this is just a completely different lifestyle.
right.
But yeah, like a lot of the parts, I mean, because they're just so fast, at least if you don't really like a part, it's not going to be very long before you're on to the next.
Mm.
I don't know. Did you have any particular ones that you really hung on to or? thought were good?
I liked the the one was what was it's I'm trying to think of the title for it. The one where Spike is talking to Sitting Bull, and there's kind of like the back and forth that Spike's relaying. It's like, oh, this like instant karma, I think is the little section of it.
Instant karma.
I think that one's instant karma, and he's like
John Lennon.
Yeah, I guess.
Well, no, that's like John Lennon had that.
Okay.
That album.
I would say, yeah, you would know that much better than me. I'm not as.
So is it a song? It's a song. Sorry, it's a song.
Okay. I was would say I'm not as familiar with that sort of thing. But the point where he's like, oh, what do you think souls are made of, and all this sort of stuff, and the last kind of back and forth of he says, like, Sitting Bull's like, if you hate someone, you hate yourself. If you love someone, you love yourself. And he's like, well, I don't feel anything to anyone. And then he's like, that's the greatest misfortune on earth. I was like, that's a pretty poignant line there that
he still doesn't get
it. Right, just adds to my, man, you're an obnoxious weenie. Like,
what an oaf.
Wait, what?
It's from The Simpsons somewhere where somebody's like, what an oaf. I can't remember if it's directed to Homer. I forget who it's directed
to. Another one I liked was the one Amazing Grace. Where Jed's talking about, there's no rules of bounty hunting, but they always want to like add rules on after the fact, or you can't do this and whatnot, and then mentioning like freelance souls are antiques, and heart's too expensive for money to buy. It's like, yeah, that certainly sits well with Jet there. One that's I think gets a little bit more into Spike to some degree is the if 6 was 9. Where he's talking about like, you can't just believe what you hear on TV and that sort of thing, and that you have to believe in something, doubt everything. And I can't remember what, like, a lot of like different philosophers and stuff that get ballied about. I can't remember who, because I know there's somebody has a similar either outlook or phrasing along those lines, as to believe in something, you got to doubt everything. And I think it's a nice insight to finally get, but also just a nice kind of mentality to kind of have, to always have that doubt, but that's where you're able to make your own little beliefs and stuff on that. So
yeah, there's the second part of that where it says, after you've doubted everything, there's a possibility of something real to believe in. Yeah. And that's, and the most random, I took a screenshot of that. The most random imagery of that, though, is that it's from Big Shot. It's such a weird, like, it doesn't really, to me, that doesn't really convey the message. But yeah.
Yeah, that's kind of adds into that whole mishmash of it, right? Because it's this choppy voiceovers with these stills of just I don't know what you'd call it, little title cards of the different philosophical musings, and then interspliced with just segments of episodes. Like you actually get those, like you get a lot of the ones that we've mentioned so far in this, of like good lines and stuff. So
I couldn't catch all of the title card, like how many of them were potentially from music. They're probably a good possibility they all are. But the ones I did catch were like part 22 was Look Back in Anger. And I'm like, I wasn't sure if that's supposed to be from the Oasis song, Don't Look Back in Anger.
I think so.
Yeah. But I wasn't too sure. Then you had like Whole Lotta Love, so Led Zeppelin.
Right.
Which, they stole that song, by the way.
Uh-oh.
Oh, I can't remember the name of the original performer, but like, it's like their full sections were lifted from the original song. The Zeppelin got caught doing a bunch of stuff.
Naughty.
Yeah. Their versions are amazing, but they're also a lot of their earlier work, especially, is all because they just really like bluegrass and the blues and stuff, jazz.
I'd say that was
stuff,
a pretty common thing too.
Yeah,
right?
it was like it really was. Yeah, not to like completely vindicate them or whatever, but yeah, no, it kind of was, unfortunately. So and then you like
I wasn't trying to vindicate.
Yeah,
I was just like
no, for sure. Like it was more common for that kind of stuff to happen, but then you like Amazing Grace, obviously. I feel like if 6 was 9 must be a song. I just don't know. Yeah.
From. It almost sounds like something that'd be like a David Bowie song or something. I don't know.
Then you had like Instant Karma, so John Lennon, Walk This Way, Aerosmith.
Can't always get what you want.
Rolling Stones. I thought Doggy Dog World was maybe Snoop Doggy Dogg, like, especially the way it's written. I was kind of like, that could be.
Maybe.
Yeah, I'm not 100% sure on that one. But yeah, You Can't Always Get What You Want. It's a pretty abundantly clear one. Yeah, case for us. Food for thought. I'm not sure on. Maybe not. I mean, it's kind of just a common phrase, as is fool's gold. So yeah,
right.
There's a good chance that they are attributed to some musician or song of some kind. A lot of them. We just know like the amount of connection to music that this series has. So very good chance that it is they are. Sorry.
Yeah, gotcha. I was going to say, is there anything in particular that sort of annoyed you about this episode?
Not really. As I said, it's just more of an indifference. Not because anything is particularly bad here. It just it doesn't really push the needle one way or the other. Because as we're going through all these episodes, yes, it sort of buffs up some of the characteristics of the other of all the characters, but as I said earlier, it's not as if you need it though to really conceptualize who they are. Like we're kind of just pretty clear, especially 13 episodes through.
I was gonna say it feels, from what I'm getting on your impressions on this, it feels like it is almost like a 13 side B.
Yeah, kind of, yeah.
Where it's like, nothing's really changed, and you just kind of muddied the mess a little bit, but you see things a little bit here and there.
Yeah, like it's certainly not bad, and it's worth a watch. But it not being included in DVD, Blu-ray sets and stuff is okay, right? Like you're really not missing a ton, but it's certainly worth a watch.
Yeah, it's one of those. It's just a really, like, if you're a fan, and I hate saying it this way, of like, if you really, really like Cowboy Bebop and you have not seen it, definitely need to watch it, just to have that, like, oh, this is just so, it's so Bebop, but it's so different that you're just like, okay, this is all right. This is kind of neat to see, like,
the flexibility of the series probably helps in this regard too. Had the series stuck with I know there's a general tone throughout, but had it been really cornered into a specific genre or whatever, this would feel a lot more out of place. But it doesn't, because as we've seen, we've just recently watched episodes 12 and 13, which were a pairing, but then the very next episode is very much a one-off again.
Right.
So that's where this works to present it in this style. And you can watch this probably at any point because it is kind of flexible. Like you could watch this after the final episode and it would be fine.
Mm-hmm. It'd probably be a bit more appreciated there. In the same hand, though, because it's not, like I said, there's nothing definitive going on in there. You're just kind of getting these little breadcrumbs of the characters.
Mm-hmm.
I think plopping it right there in the middle, right after Jupiter Jazz Part 2, is a good spot. This is why I kind of fought to, not very hard or anything, but this is why I kind of was like, let's have it right in the middle as a way to bifurcate the two sections, but also just as a not necessarily as a palate cleanser,
but intermission.
Yeah, like a little bit of an intermission, a little bit of a breather, but not in the sense of going silly or just kind of back to normal, but something of like, okay, this is, it's back to normal, but in the way that like it's almost like you're sitting down and having like these very abrupt or quick pieces of a larger conversation that you don't fully remember, if that makes any sense. So,
yeah, and at least the dialogue work is something fresh because the imagery isn't.
Right.
So it's not just trying to. There were a few parts that were kind of attributed to other sections that where some of the lines definitely were lifted from previous episodes, but there's enough kind of new spoken material or recorded material that helps keep the narrative at least a little bit different than what's come before.
Yeah, and probably the weakest aspect of it for me is how abrupt those last little sections are. Like, they're really quick, and there's just speed to it that's, I don't know if it's because of just how, like, a style of, build up. All right, we've hit that moment, and now it's just kind of wrap up. But, they play through that whole Shaka Zombie song, and it's like, like a third of the whole thing. And it flashes this is not the end, you'll see the real Cowboy Bebop someday. It's just almost like, how to put it, like, almost like a unrequited love sort of thing, where it's this failed thing, but it's like, oh no, we'll make it work kind of thing. It's just such a raw thing in a way. It's just really strange to see,
And it's pushing into these, and the last several episodes we've watched have had some rather bizarre ending, what's the word I want, like sign-offs. We were pretty consistent all the way through with the Sea of Space Cowboy, and then right in this middle chunk here, we've been starting to get these weird sort of, I don't know if they're teases, if they're like, I don't really get it. And this one, from what you've explained, like this being, it seemed as if the series was on wobbly legs, right? Like it was a potential of this shutting down.
Well, yeah, it got canceled, and then that aired in June, like June 26th, 1998, and then it was pretty much left for dead, and then all of a sudden it randomly got picked up to start airing in November.
For those final episodes?
No, it started again from. It started again, and It started from episode 1, and it might not have been November. It was maybe like October.
Okay.
But it got picked up. Like TV Tokyo dropped it, and then like Wow or something picked it up. Yeah. Like it's in Bebop, and that's the one thing about Bebop. Bebop has had to deal with this kind of stuff before, right?
Mm-hmm.
So, like it was deemed too violent, for the time and everything, and they're just like, nope, get it out of here.
Mm-hmm.
And then random network picks it up, and then same thing happens with the movie.
Mm-hmm.
The movie is like, oh shoot, September 11th. Like even like a few of the episodes were like skipped,
withheld, or okay,
right, because of
the situation.
Because of September 11th and stuff.
Yep.
Like Sympathy for the Devil, I think did, which is kind of an odd one. Waltz for Venus did, because God forbid you see a mosque or something, and then what was the other one? The Cowboy Funk. But that kind of makes sense to a certain degree. Since it's pretty much the bad guy, and that is literally Teddy Bomber.
Yeah.
Like, so, it's like that, and then just the movie having to hold off for a bit and stuff. It's just, it's weird how this show is, took those hits, but was still able to kind of persevere.
Yeah.
Yeah, especially the one hit, like this first hit where it was just like TV Tokyo's like, this is too violent. Mm-hmm. And you guys you were told make something cool with, as long as it had space and models could be made for money, or, be sold as toys.
Yep.
And you guys have gave us this. We don't appreciate that.
Yeah. Interesting. Okay. Well, I don't have too much more I can really add for this. Like, that's
all right.
The type of episode it is. So.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I don't want to even really put a bounty to this one, because there's not really it's not it. Myself, I really like it. I think it's neat. It's neat. So, and yeah, it's just a neat thing to see a dive into the characters, but it still stays with the characters as they are. And I know you bring up those things, but like I said, I think, especially with Faye's case, that she's just, that's kind of how she is. Is very, one way this way, the next day this way, kind of thing.
Okay.
So, but yeah, any last little?
No, I think I'm good to wrap up.
All right. Well, yeah. Like I said, if you haven't seen this, I highly recommend it, just to see it. And if you have seen it, let us know what you think about it. For Sushi B and myself, thanks for watching, listening, all that sort of fun jazz, and see you, Space Cowboy.